The following is an A-Team PR production.
Welcome to the Free Range Texan podcast. We're kind of an escape hatch for everyday life. We know today's world has issues. Maybe that's just all the more reason to spend some time. So saddle up with a bunch of Free Range Texans. Here's one now, our host, Michael Shawn.
Free Range Texan, episode 47. Howdy, y'all. We're wheels up on this edition of our podcast. And what a show we've got. Songman Cary Banks has favored us with a visit on our Free Range talent file. You know, when you're listening to Cary Banks, it sounds like Texas. Free Range Texan episode 47 is brought to you entirely by the public relations firm and custom media production studios of A-Team PR. Our world has changed, and promotion needs and capabilities have changed with it. Maybe it's time for a fresh approach. Maybe you could hire the A-Team. Find out more at a-team.com. Foxy, the Wonder Dog, is patrolling our perimeter here at the A-Team PR studios, making sure that the snacks in the green room are safe. Sort of. And our walk down to Michael Shawn's Campfire reveals the story about Black Jack Ketchum, a true tale. Maybe. You decide. All that and more, so let's saddle up and get ready to ride. Not your average little podcast from Texas. Neighbor, you're riding with the Free Range Texan. I think now would be a good time to tell our Free Range Texan listeners about something that's going on with one of our friends. If you're a regular listener to this podcast, you have no doubt become familiar with a character by the name of Roger Dykes. Roger has worked behind the scenes with the Free Range Texan since the beginning. He's made countless contributions that range from scalding critiques to campfire stories, which we are always in search of. For those of you who don't know, Roger is a full-on quadriplegic in a wheelchair. He was born with cerebral palsy. Now in his 60s, he has accomplished remarkable things that range from a master's degree at Texas Tech University, authoring a book, to a career for a number of years performing on stage as a wheelchair comedian and after-dinner speaker. I have been acquainted with Roger, and we have been friends in the truest sense of the word for a long time. It is not well known that Roger carries the torch for the disabled and the people like Roger, who now continually wrestle with programs designed and put on the books 20 and 30 years ago, that now leave huge gaps in the care of the very same people they are designed to help. Recently, I was having a conversation with Roger, and he was lamenting that with all of his letter writing and phone calls, what he really didn't have was a platform for his message. I knew what had to be done, and I immediately spoke to Roger about it. In all the years I've known him, fear has never been an issue with Roger Dykes. And it was only a few weeks later when Roger's podcast entitled Roger Dykes Just Saying was born. And the first 4 episodes have been released. So here's what I'm saying. For those of you who know Roger from our podcast, to those of you who work with or have family members who are disabled, Roger puts up a new podcast every 3 weeks. And if you subscribe, you'll get a reminder. I just can't help but believe that many of you will find Roger's stories about his day-to-day life to be remarkable. And so, I would just like to let you know that you can hook up with Roger on Roger Dyke's Just Saying podcast. ROGERDYKES. Just Saying. Now on all of the major podcast purveyors worldwide. You're riding with the Free Range Texan on the best little podcast in Texas. Hello, this is Michael Shawn. I wanted to take just a moment and tell you about something else we are producing here at the A-Team PR Studios. It's one of my other gigs outside of the Free Range Texan podcast. Now, while on our podcast, we cover lots of different genres and all types of different storytelling and music, this one thing I'm telling you about is pretty much for country music listeners. Being a Texas boy, that's kind of natural for me. So here's the scoop. Weeknights at 10 o'clock, Texas time, I host a show called The Midnight Express. It's on a new country music network that began at the beginning of this year. It is a worldwide entertainment network featuring the best in country music 24 hours a day. Incidentally, right now, it might be a good time for me to point out that Boss Country Radio is designed to provide programming to broadcast stations anywhere in the world. But in case you're in an area where a broadcast station has not picked up Boss Country Radio, it streams worldwide in digital stereo. You can connect to that at bosscountryradio.com. And from there, there's lots of ways to listen. Well, anyway, here's my point. If you like country music, I just wanted to recommend to you bosscountryradio.com, where every weeknight at 10 o'clock, you can listen to Michael Shawn's Midnight Express. I just figure it's somewhere else you and I could meet up. So if it's the Free Range Texan podcast or Boss Country Radio's Midnight Express, thanks for listening. It's time now for another segment of the Free Range Talent File. Brought to you by A-Team PR, bringing a host of creative media production and public relations services to our exclusive list of clients. Maybe you could hire the A-Team. And now, here's the next segment of the Free Range Talent File. And on this edition of the Free Range Talent File, we're going to open the segment with some great original music from Cary Banks. Sounds like Texas to me.
Well, it might have started up in Turkey with a Bob Wills fiddle tune. Or maybe it was down in Deep Ellum when Blind Lemon sang the blues. Scott Joplin's ragtime piano gave rise to jazz and R&B. Though it's kind of hard to say where it started, it sounds like Texas to me. Sounds like Texas to me. Rock and roll, country, R&B, bluegrass, Tejana, roots Americana, and good old Western swing. this wide, wide world, from sea to shining sea. Whenever I hear good music, it sounds like Texas to me. Stevie Ray brought the blues from Austin. Houston gave us ZZ Top. Sir Doug started something down in San Antonio. It ain't never gonna stop. The West Texas wind brought Buddy Holly in, like Roy Orbison, Mac Davis, Joe Ely. Though it's always great here in the Lone Star State, it sounds like Texas to me. Sounds like Texas to me. Rock and roll, country, R&B, bluegrass, Tejana, our roots Americana, and good old Western swing. Well, I've been all around this wide, wide world, from sea to shining sea. Whenever I hear good music, it sounds like Texas to me. Jerry, Jeff, Robert Earl, asleep at the wheel, and George Strait, Towns Van Zandt, Ray Wiley, Gary P., Larry Gatlin, Janis Joplin, Steve Miller, Lyle Lovett, Nora Jones, Guy and Susan, Waylon and Willie, Flacco, Freddie, Charlie Pride and Leanne Rhymes, Tanya Tucker, Leanne Womack, Don Henry, Christopherson, Newberry, Jody Nix, Rodney Crowell, Emily, Marty, and Natalie. Sounds like Texas to me. Rock and roll, country, R&B, bluegrass, Tejana, our roots Americana, and good old Western swing. Well, I've been all around this wide, wide world, from sea to shining sea. Whenever I hear good music, it sounds like Texas to me. We got a new generation coming along. Wade, Pat, Roger, Corey, and Randy, Charla Corn, Terry Hendricks, Amanda Shires, Casey Musgraves, Bonnie Bishop, Tori V. We got our Creole cousins down in New Orleans, Red Dirt Brothers up in OKC. But it really don't matter where you play it, it sounds like Texas to me. Anytime I hear good music, like that, well, it sounds like Texas to me.
And that sounds like Texas from our free-range Texan friend, Cary Banks. And we have him here on the Free Range Talent File. Hello, Cary Banks.
How are you, Michael?
Oh, man, I want to tell you, and we were talking a little bit before we went on, that it is just so great to have you with us on this edition of the Free Range Texan podcast. You're a busy guy. You've retired 2 or 3 times, but you never slowed down.
Well, I retired from South Plains College, where I was a music professor. And since then, I've recorded 2 CDs and written a book.
While you were lollygagging.
While I was lollygagging, yeah.
Oh, man. I want to read something to you. Sorry, you're going to be bored. You may need to go get a snack or something while we do this, Cary. But I want to read this for our listeners. I tell you, if you're from West Texas, you know the name Cary Banks and appreciate Cary Banks. Let me read this to you, folks. Cary Banks is a professional musician, award-winning songwriter, and a television host, and a music educator. As a member of the Maines Brothers Band, he's been recording albums on Mercury Records. Cary was inducted into the West Texas Walk of Fame. Cary has performed in shows from such well-known artists as Bo Diddley, Dixie Chicks, Barbara Mandrell, Tom T. Hall, Leroy Parnell, Joe Ely, Terry Allen, Richie McDonald, Bob Livingston, Radney Foster, Pat Green, Terry Hendricks, and a whole bunch of others. As a songwriter, Cary won first place in a national songwriting contest in L.A. Also, he received the Silver Telly Award as featured artist and co-host of public broadcasting series Storytellers and Music Makers. Cary has recently released his first book, Almost Like a Professional. We'll talk about that a little bit coming up. And a graduate of Texas Tech University. He did, for a time, do a stint as the music instructor and chairman of the Creative Arts Department at South Plains College in 2016, and now continues to run full throttle in the music business, which we touched on a while ago. Now, I said all that to say this. What are you, about 110 years old now?
Sometimes it feels that way.
I talk to people, and this is like 3 of their music careers. You are a talented artist and recording artist and songwriter. And we just heard that song, Sounds Like Texas, which is rich in content. Gosh, what a great song. What are you doing these days?
I am continuing to write. The lockdown that we've experienced has sort of really put a damper on what I've been able to do.
Oh, yes.
We're just now, I've got my second post-COVID gig coming up. I'll continue to write, continue to record. I've got, several songs going into production here in the next few months. And so I just write and play and enjoy my time.
Nowadays, where are you recording?
Several different places. We have some wonderful studios here in Lubbock. Of course, Scott Ferris and Amusement Park Studios.
Yes.
My friend Wally Moyers and his studio, and I work with Alan Crossland at Route 1 Acuff Studios. And
my. That goes way back.
Yes, sir.
Man, what was it like? People, if you're from a certain region of the United States, then you feel like you grew up with the Maines Brothers, and you still, if you hear something on the radio from the Maines Brothers, it's like, wow, they're playing the Maines Brothers. And the members of the band are like a who's who of people that have gone on and done remarkable things in their careers. But what was it like in those early days with the Maines Brothers?
First met Lloyd Maines in the early 70s when he was an engineer and producer there at Caldwell Studios when they were recording on 2-track and 4-track machines.
Oh, my.
And I played with Lloyd and the Maines Brothers, throughout the 70s and on occasion. Then in the early 80s, I started as a full-time member. We literally traveled coast to coast playing music. We had a record deal with Mercury, had a couple of chart records, and burned up the highway. And that was quite an experience.
Well, that's not a simple thing to do, too. How many members of the band at that time?
We had 7 members of the band, and when we traveled, we had on our bus, we had 7 guys in the band, sound man, light man, and bus driver. That's 10 big old hungry, hairy-legged boys eating 3 times a day.
Plus, several members of the band by that time were already married and had families.
That was rough. That was pretty rough. And that's probably, when we came to the end of our relationship with Mercury Records, everybody was, pretty well tired of the road. And, you being an old radio man, that whole thing about chasing radio with singles
oh my
just
heavens,
begins
yes.
to wear on you.
Yeah.
And so, we pretty much started slowing down in the early 90s.
You put on your game face and walk through the door at 6 o'clock in the morning. With this kind of crooked grin on your face, like you're really glad to be there.
Right.
And, man, you guys, people don't realize the grueling hours and schedule of being on the road on a tour like that.
22 hours of boredom and 2 hours of excitement. But
well, I'm certain there are a lot of stories. People might look at a guy like you and go, man, you could write a book. And you have. Tell us about your book.
Well, it's called Almost Like a Professional. my life and career as a West Texas musician, starting down in Big Spring, Texas in 1965, and then tracing my now 55-year career as getting paid to play music.
You know, if you've lived in Big Spring for any amount of time, you realize that really truly is the center of the universe there.
Well, you know, I still stay in contact with my good buddy Jody Nix.
Oh my, yes.
We still calls Big Spring home, and I've been trying diligently for several years to get Civic Lubbock to induct Jody and his dad and uncle into the West Texas Walk of Fame. So
I can't believe they haven't.
Another plug in.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we're trying.
And you've raised a family, isn't that right?
That's right. My daughter is a professor of political science at Washington State University in Washington.
Wow.
My son is a professional musician who's played in the Texas music scene almost 20 years now. He's worked with artists like Brandon Ryder and Honey Brown, and he's working with a young lady now named Kimberly Dunn.
Now, are they working out of Austin?
Working out of Austin, yes.
How did I know? Oh, man.
We still love to get out there and play music.
Well, of course, your music is available online as well.
Yeah.
And we want to remind the folks that if they go to freerangetexan.net, there are so many things concerning Cary Banks that you may be interested in. One, his music will be available, among other places, in our Free Range Texan House of Treasures. And you can click on that and see a lot of other tremendous Texas music, and every single guest that's ever been on our podcast, and Cary Banks' music will be there as well. Also, if you will go to freerangetexan.net and click on the blog, we have an article up that talks about Cary Banks and what we really thought about him. After, just kidding. We have that blog article, and the thing about that is there's a lot of pictures of Cary Banks in all different types of situations, and we enjoy putting those up for you. Also, Cary Banks has a video, and let me just ask you right now, your video for Sounds Like Texas.
There is a video on Sounds Like Texas. It was produced by a young man named Justin Robnett, and there's also this silly little song I wrote a couple of weeks ago that I put a video up called Stimulus Check. That's on YouTube as well.
Knowing you, I bet that's a good song.
Well, it's a silly little song that I just recorded in my house, you know, just me and the guitar, and put it up on YouTube and Facebook, and got 3,000 views in 2 days.
Beautiful, man. I love that. Well, then with your permission, sir, we will take the Sounds Like Texas video and put it on our blog so that when folks go there to read about you and see pictures about you, they can also take a look at that video.
Well, thank you very much. And that the electric guitar on that particular cut is my good friend Stevie Guitar Williams.
Hey, you got a project or two going with him, don't you, right now?
Oh, yeah. We have a CD that we put out called Cary and Steve, a couple of guitar players sitting around picking. And that single from that CD is the Sounds Like Texas, but we've had the rest of the album is all instrumental guitarists, and we've had some pretty good luck with the record. It continues to sell a little bit and get some airplay.
Well, we'll see. I have to double check with the Brain Trust here, but we'll see. Make sure that's available with your music at the House of Treasures on our freerangetexan.net website as well. Also, Cary, the song "Ain't Nobody Lonely." I
did write that. Interestingly, in 1975, I was on tour in the Southern and Midwest with the comedy artist Jerry Jordan, who had the big comedy hit Phone Call from God.
Yeah, I remember that guy. And you were on tour with him.
His main gig is, he's a real well-known oil painting artist, but he ran across this comedy thing that just turned out to be a monster hit for him. And we were in Hot Springs, Arkansas in the middle of winter, and where I came up with the idea for that song.
Well, it's a beautiful song, and with your permission, we want to share that with our listeners to this podcast. Cary Banks, you're a busy guy, but you took time to do a podcast, and we are so glad that you came on to the Free Range Texan. And with the amount of work and the music that you have done, I can only implore you, sir, to please come back and be on our podcast again.
I would be honored.
So here it is, a song called Ain't Nobody Lonely. This is Cary Banks on the Free Range Texan podcast.
Every night I walk the streets of this lonesome town, looking for that certain smile I've waited for so long. I make the bars and the boulevards till I can't go on. Walking home alone, I sing the same old lonesome song. Ain't nobody lonely, lonely as me. Ain't nobody knows, ain't nobody sees. There's got to be someone lonely as me. There's got to be someone, but where can she be? Lonesome town, a girl is all alone, walking through these empty streets, going no place but home. She's looking for that certain smile she's waited for so long. Don't she know I'm waiting here? Can't she hear my song? Ain't nobody lonely, lonely as me. Ain't nobody knows, ain't nobody sees. There's got to be someone to be someone, but where can she be? There's got to be someone, oh, lonely as me. There's got to be someone, but where can she be?
You've been listening to the Free Range Talent File. If you'd like more information about our guest, just go to our website at freerangetexan.net. Also, submissions to be interviewed on the Free Range Talent File should be sent to our website at freerangetexan.net. Have digital recording device will travel where the past, present, and future collide. The Free Range Texan Podcast. Hi, this is Michael Shawn. Welcome to our campfire. Get you some cowboy coffee over there and settle back while I relate to you a story about Thomas Black Jack Ketchum. He was the only person ever hanged in Clayton, New Mexico. He was also the only man ever hanged for train robbery in the entire state, a law that was later found to be unconstitutional. But that was a little too late for Black Jack Ketchum. There was this old cowboy who told a story of meeting Black Jack Ketchum while camping in his younger days at the Philmont Scout Ranch. You see, this old cowboy was a Boy Scout. He and several other Boy Scouts were backpacking through the mountains, visiting various historic sites, including an abandoned gold mine, a ghost town, one of Black Jack Ketchum's outlaw hideouts. The hideout was a large rock overhang, and the scouts thought they would be a good camping spot for the night. However, their leader insisted that they stay at a nearby designated site. Disappointed, several of the scouts set their tents up several hundred feet away from the leader's tent, hoping that they would have a chance to sneak back to the hideout later that night. About an hour before midnight, the rest of the camp had fallen asleep, but 5 of the scouts gathered their sleeping bags and quietly stole away back to the hideout. They set up their camp under the overhang and built a campfire where they sat around talking about their day of hiking. When the fire burned down to nothing more than just red coals, the scouts settled down in their sleeping bags. One by one, they drifted off to sleep, thinking about Black Jack Ketchum. Suddenly, the person telling this story was awakened by a noise in the bushes. He felt paralyzed with fear, unable to move. He tried to call out to the others, but his throat was just all knotted up. Then, peeking from under the sleeping bag, he saw what appeared to be some sort of cowboy, dressed all in black, running out of the bushes toward the hideout. He said the man was mostly solid, but parts of him appeared to be what he described as translucent. He described the man as filthy dirty with a tattered hat, clothes from the 1800s, and even noticed terribly stained teeth. His face was like sunburned leather, glistening with sweat. The apparition held a revolver. The cowboy was apparently unaware of the scouts, but our scout observer said that he immediately feared for his life as his inability to move continued. As he watched, a strange fog emanated from the tree line. across from a small stream, and he could hear men yelling, but couldn't quite understand what they were saying. Then, gunfire. The cowboy in the black turned and fired his revolver 6 times into the trees, and then ran and stood right over the scout. The cowboy in black was clearly wounded in the shoulder. He stopped long enough to discharge 6 shell casings from the revolver right on top of the boy's sleeping bag. The cowboy then reloaded his revolver and fired additional shots into the trees. It was only then that the cowboy saw the scout at his feet. The expression on the cowboy's face indicated that the scout had just appeared before his eyes. The cowboy seemed to be confused and confounded, while the scout was terrified. Then the cowboy uncocked his pistol, looked at the scout very closely, and said, "You're not supposed to be here." And then just disappeared into thin air. The next morning, as the scouts broke camp, the boy stood with his fellow campers and told them about what by this time seemed to be like a dream. They were all amused by the story, but it was a funny thing. As the scout rolled up his sleeping bag, he found 6 empty shell casings that rolled out into the dust. Later, when he returned to base camp, the scout visited an old saloon where a photograph of Black Jack Ketchum was displayed. It was clear enough to see that the photograph was the same man that the scout had seen at the hideout. When he told his friends, they pretty much brushed him off, and the scout never told anyone about it again, but he kept the shell casings. After he returned home, he took them to a gun expert who said the casings were dated from sometime around 1878, but appeared to be brand new in their condition, and the gunpowder could still be smelled in them. And the gunpowder was one that was used in the last century, but not today. Our young scout had learned his lesson about trying to tell the story of what he had witnessed the night near the ghost town. But he was confident in the fact that, should he ever decide to tell the tale, he had 6 empty shells from Black Jack Ketchum's pistol to back up his story. A few years went by, and he moved out and went to college. And with the best of intentions, his mom decided to clean out and reorganize his room, as moms often do. Well, anyway, while emptying a drawer by his bed, among other things, she found the empty shells and simply threw them away. Leaving no trace of the night he was spoken to by the ghost of Black Jack Ketchum. It's just another tale around our campfire. I'm Michael Shawn. Adios, my friends. Cary Banks. great visit and good Texas music on our podcast. Y'all pay attention now. Cary Banks music is available now at the Free Range Texan House of Treasures, located at freerangetexan.net. Plus, a couple of his videos are waiting for you on our blog, including the one we talked about entitled Stimulus Check. Just go to freerangetexan.net and click on the blog. And finally, should you get the chance to share our podcast, we're everywhere on all of the platforms worldwide. Or you can just send them to freerangetexan.net. Thanks to all of you for running off with us for a while. Foxy, get in the pickup. Take 'em home, sweetie pie.
Thank y'all for listening to the Free Range Texan podcast, produced at 18PR Studios, out yonder in West Texas, with our host, who's been voted the hardest working man in podcasting, Michael Shawn. Feedback or submissions to our program can be submitted on our website, freerangetexan.net. That's freerangetexan.net. This is Sweetie Pie on behalf of Michael, Shawn, and the crew here in Studio A, where we're all looking forward to spending time with you on our next bi-weekly episode of the Free Range Texan podcast. Y'all come back now, you hear?
An 18PR production. End transmission.